Good morning and welcome to our podcast. Today ChitChat is a new podcast showcasing stories, insights, tips and tricks from the professional working world. We will be discussing all sorts of topics with a host of interesting and diverse people from different backgrounds. My name is Jonathan and I will be your host today. So on today's podcast, we will be talking with Danielle O'Brien on the ups and downs of emigrating to another country for work. Danielle works as a HR business lead for a leading company in the world of digital-based professional services. So welcome, Danielle, and thank you for taking time out of your what must be a very busy schedule to join us today.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm very excited to be here.
Very good, thank you. Well, I thought we might start off with you just kind of telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to do what you do.
Sure. So first of all, maybe I'll explain a little bit about what I do. So I'm a HR business lead, which is quite a senior HR role, looking after a leadership team. In my case, it's a sales unit who are looking after the EMEA and Eurasia region, looking after sales in large tier 1 telco companies. So it's a very diverse region and a very diverse group of people that I look after. And what I do for them is it's a HR field role, essentially. So supporting all of the people processes, pretty much everything from helping to hire the employees to the release processes and everything in between: performance management, learning, salary review, bonuses, grievances, career development, coaching, team building. So it's a really busy role, and it's quite diverse. No 2 days are the same, which is something that I really like about it.
Always nice, isn't it, to have a bit of diversity and not doing the same thing day in, day out.
Exactly. I'm not one for a mundane role. I would not thrive in this environment. So for sure, the diversity is a huge attraction for me in this role.
Nice. Yeah, that's exactly the same for me. I like to do roles that are varying and have a little bit of change in them, so that's good. And that sounds like quite a full-on role as well, with all covering pretty much all the different aspects of looking after a team and their daily working life and such.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a very senior group of people. I have one general manager that I look after and 5 vice presidents. They all have their own characters and they can be very needy. So I'm, on call all the time for whatever their HR need is. But I really enjoy being in the center of that leadership group and being in a role where I feel that I can make a difference and I'm part of, something, special. So it's a good role. I have great flexibility, but yeah, it can be quite demanding at times too.
Yeah,
that's just the nature of it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's one of the things that always come to mind especially when people are first explaining about what they do, and especially with a role like that quite a kind of senior advanced role. I'm imagining that HR business lead was perhaps not the job role you thought you might have when you were growing up. Was that your dream as a child?
No, no, it wasn't. I kind of fell into it and moved towards it throughout my career. But as a child, I wanted to be a florist, actually. And maybe one day I still will be. But I loved the idea of doing something creative and making beautiful things and sharing them with people to enjoy. So I, used to love going out into my mum's garden and picking flowers and making arrangements and things like. And even now, I still, still enjoy it. So, but very different to where I ended up. And I think, as I got older, I grew up in a really small town in Australia, and I always thought that success was moving to the city and having a job in a big corporation and that meant you were successful. And I think over time I've learned that this is not necessarily the criteria for success. And I've met some amazing people. For one, when we got married, when I married my husband, our wedding celebrant was just, she was only young. She was like maybe 24, and she just had such a passion for what she does and marrying people, and so happy and effervescent. And she used to say things like, I just love love. But it really changed my perception on what a successful career can look like, and how important it is to be passionate about what you do and love what you do.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think, as we all do get older and having a few years work experience under our belt, your kind of perception of that does change quite dramatically. And interesting,
Sure.
there's a huge amount of people, 40s, 50s, who retrain, who go back to university, who completely change what they've been doing and switch to something else, which perhaps, in many cases gives them a bit more, time and satisfaction. And so, yeah, very good point, I think. But
Sure.
I mean, given that was what you wanted to do, what was your first job? Was that on that sort of lines, or was it, again, like most of us, people fell into something?
I did. Again, it was a small town, so I took my CV out and dropped it into all the businesses in our main street. I didn't get anything immediately, but about 6 months later, one of the small cafes came back to me, and actually they were a family friend, and they came back to me and said, "Oh, look, we need someone to help out in the restaurant, washing dishes and clearing tables. Are you still available? Would you be interested?" So, it shows, it helps to put yourself out there. And, I was always really proactive about getting jobs when I was in my younger years. And, the importance of your network, and, reaching out to people that and asking them what they have and what's available. After the cafe, I had jobs in retail, like liquor stores. And my first, I'd say, proper job was a reservations consultant for a hot air ballooning company, which I did on the weekends while I was at university. And that was great, because one of the things I like is, sharing experiences with people, and everyone was so excited when they'd call to book in their hot air ballooning trip. And it was just something, I just really loved that company and what they were doing. So
it's interesting because, from your early ideas of what you wanted to do to, as the many humble beginnings of most of us working in hospitality, in some form or other, and then kind of ending up in your current position, was there a conscious choice along the way to move into what you're doing, or was it just, following a path and finding yourself here eventually?
It was a little bit of both. When I finished university, and my university degree was in public relations, marketing, and journalism, so slightly different to HR, which I ended up in. But I went for my first interview. It was with Disney on Ice, as their marketing assistant, which I thought sounded amazing, but I didn't get it. And I kind of felt like I was in a crossroads in my life of, okay, well, I can start to apply for other jobs, or maybe this is a good time for me to go overseas. And I went overseas because I felt that I didn't want to stay, get a job, buy a house, get married, have kids, and really straight away fall into this kind of pathway, that sometimes happens when you get very settled into full-time employment. There's a natural progression of the things that happen after that. And a friend of mine was going overseas, and so I asked her if I could go with her. So a few months later, found myself in London with a working holiday visa. And I got there, and I had about £1,000 in my bank account, which I was going through very, very quickly. And I showed up at an agency and said, "Give me a job, any job, I'll do anything. Just give me a job that starts tomorrow." And so they put me as a HR assistant in a big Australian insurance company, actually, in the centre of London, just near Bank Station. And I was meant to stay for 2 weeks, and they kept me on. They said, do you want to do some filing? And I was like, okay. So I did filing for about a month. I had a crick in my neck from going through
Yeah.
all the paperwork, but I was happy. I was working. I was
Yeah.
supporting myself living overseas and doing it on my own. And then eventually, they kept extending my contract. And eventually their HR assistant left, and they offered me a full-time job. So that kind of started my career in HR.
Yeah.
Humble beginnings, just doing contracts and, reference letters and things like this. And then a friend of mine was moving to Dublin, and I decided to move with her. So I had another opportunity to maybe go back to my marketing and PR roots. But again, I found myself showing up at an agency in a very nice suit saying, I need a job, give me a job, any job. And they put me in a top 5 law firm. And again, I was meant to stay with them as a contractor for a couple of months, and they ended up keeping me for the full year while I was on my working holiday visa in Ireland. So from there it was, I met my husband while I was living in Dublin. So that kind of opened up this international world for me when I was meant to be going home and going back to my Australian life. And I got home, I took another contracting job, which just happened to be with the company that I'm still with now, 15 years later. So
Oh, wow. Yeah.
again, it was another HR admin role. And from there, it just grew. And eventually, my husband came, my now husband came out to Australia, and he did his working year visa in Australia. And then he needed to go home, and we were kind of thinking to ourselves, where can we go where we can both easily get visas and can be together? And we were looking at different options, and a role came up in my company in Singapore for a HR partner, and they said, would you like to go? And I was like, okay. And so again, I kind of found myself in this position, and that was a real turning point in my career, because it was a front face, like a customer facing HR role, and I was the first HR to arrive in Southeast Asia. So everything just ended up on my table, and it was a massive learning curve, and you just had to dig your feet in and do it. And it was an amazing experience from a learning perspective, and it really kind of set me up to move away from those admin roles into a much grittier HR role.
Yeah, something with a bit more bite in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's interesting.
Just kind of gone from there.
Sorry, go on.
No, that's it. It was.
Yeah.
It's just gone from there.
It's interesting. It's brought up a couple of things. I was thinking about, one is that one of the things people often ask me about, or I see people having the dilemma over, is like, what am I going to do with my life? Like, what career am I going to take? What job do I want to have? And I think, kind of what you touched on a lot is it doesn't. You don't actually have to pick something, from day one. It's a lot of stuff comes naturally, out of the woodwork through life as you're working and meeting people and networking. She said, and I think that's really important, and I think that's, I don't know how you feel, perhaps the same way, but I think that comes a lot more when you travel as well for work. When you're moving to a different country and you've got new experiences, and sometimes you have to find a job, straight away.
Yeah, look, I think that, in that situation, I didn't have any money, so I was very, very open to just do anything. But then I've had other experiences. So, I relocated with my company to Singapore, and then from there I relocated to London, and then now to Ireland, which is where I'm currently based. So I've had different opportunities where I've arrived with no job, and then others which were a little bit more planned and a little bit more structured, with the benefit of the financial help of the company, which is great. But they were very different experiences as
Mm.
well. When I moved to Singapore, it was with a partner compared to, being by myself. So then you have somebody else to think about who also needs, you might have a job, but, my husband needed to find a job. And, I definitely, it was, he looked for the jobs before we got to Singapore, but it was very, very difficult to find something when you're not in the country.
Yeah.
So once he arrived and he could go for interviews and, started to network with people, people would start to share, oh, there's this engineering company that, such and such person works for. I'll give you their number. And through the network, again, it was easier for him to try and find a job.
I guess, doing it in both different ways, either, moving without a job, just throwing yourself somewhere has its own challenges, but then also moving, with a job, and the other challenge of having a partner and stuff is there's always a challenge, isn't there? I guess when you're, what are some of the challenges that you've come up against, like, in moving, to another country for work?
I think it's all very exciting at the beginning. And you're very consumed, in either scenario by just settling in, finding an apartment, getting to know the area, settling into life in this new country. But I find after a couple of months, you kind of, all that settles down. And you kind of realize, so sometimes you might just wake up and go, what am I doing here? And you realize that you don't have a network, like a family network around you, or you've left your friends at home and you have no social life. And that I think can be really confronting. And one of the things, and I help a lot of people in my role to relocate. And one of the advice that I always give them is, you have to invest in your local community. You have to go out and you need to make friends, and try and build a social life. And you have to really proactively do that. I mean, when I arrived in London, I moved into a share house. So I had a ready-made social life through the people I was living with. But when we got to Singapore, it was just the two of us in an apartment, and it can be quite lonely. So one of the things we did, my local Irish football team in Singapore, it opened up this massive community of expats for us who just, became like a family to us while we were away. And it's so important to have other people that, other than just your partner, because otherwise your partner becomes everything. So
yeah, that's so true. I for myself as well, I've lived in many countries, ranging from Australia to India, Canada, Austria, Switzerland, Portugal, and I think it's a really good point. Is it's, after the excitement of getting there and new thing and finding a job or going for a job or getting a house and the bank account and the phone and all the stuff, you suddenly sometimes could find yourself like, oh, I am here on my own. I haven't really got any friends or anybody.
Yeah.
And, creating that community. And actually, interesting, when I was in India, I got chatting to a guy and he turned out he played rugby, and we were chatting. He said, "Oh, do you want to come and play rugby on the weekend?" I thought, yeah, I used to play rugby a lot at school. I thought I'll turn up with it sounds like a throw the ball around in the park with the lads. And when I turned up, it was a proper full-on game against that Bangalore Army team. It was quite an eye-opener. But then I ended up joining a team called the Bangalore Refugees. And we played all over India and in Indian sports. And I met this whole group of friends and people, and which really made my time a lot better as well. So yeah, I think it's a really, really important point. It's when you get somewhere is to remember you do need to actively find a group, find something to do, you have an interest, and kind of great, and bring people around you. Because I think quite quickly, if you don't do that, it can become a bit lonely and a bit, you lose your kind of enthusiasm and interest in it, and you start having thoughts about, oh, should I go home, and is this for me? And Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. And, I've, with all the expat families I've worked with over the years, and there's been a lot, if the family and the expat spouse aren't happy and they aren't settled, then the employee can't settle either.
yeah,
So it can be a major hurdle to overcome. And, sometimes depending on which country you're in, the expat spouse doesn't have a work permit to actually work, so they're stuck at home, and it can be really isolating. So it's so important to have people around you. And I have seen people literally say, okay, we're leaving now because my family just aren't settling and
yeah,
just don't like it. So and I think it's, I mean, we experienced that a little bit when we got to Singapore. I settled very, very quickly, and I was, very happy with my job, and I was, really happy with living in Singapore. And eventually my husband loved it too. But at the beginning, it was much, much harder for him. And, you do have those conversations early on saying, have we made the right decision? Should we stay? And
yeah,
I'm so glad that we persevered and continued through it, because it turned out to be, such an amazing 3 years of our lives, both professionally, because we both learned so much, but, personally as well. We traveled all over Southeast Asia, and it was just such a cool experience. And so I'm, so glad we did it. And it was so different to anywhere else we've lived, in more Western parts of the world. So but I think one of the things that really got us through that initial 6 months until we had an established group of friends was every month we booked a weekend away. So at all times we had something to look forward to. It was only a few weeks away, whether it was something, close by or a short weekend away. And it just helped us to kind of get to know the area, see the benefits of the area, and kind of really enjoy life. And then once we had
yeah,
our friend circle, we did more normal things like go to the pub, or just like what you said with the rugby team, the Singapore Gaelic Lions used to play a tournament with all the other Gaelic teams across Southeast Asia. So we'd have weekends away going to Malaysia, Hong Kong, Jakarta,
yeah.
you know,
Nice.
so it was amazing. I never played. I was an honorary member watching from the sides, but I met loads and loads of people, and that really
Yeah,
opened up my personal social circle as well.
yeah, nice, nice. Very, very important.
And
Um,
I think if you're settled at home and in your personal life, it does have a genuine impact on your work life, because you can just actually focus and you're happy, and
yeah,
everything just goes a little bit smoother, I think.
yeah. It takes a bit of effort, doesn't it? You have to put a bit
Yeah.
of footwork in and to make it happen for sure.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question and touch on something from earlier. Obviously, you've moved in two different ways. You've moved, like, you've just got your travel bug, jumped on a plane, gone somewhere, and then you've also done the thing where you've had a job and you've moved for the job. I mean, when you were actually
Mhm.
just going, on the plane without a job, did you find it easy to get work each time? Was it something that just, you just stepped into it, or did you have to kind of put a lot of work into that, or
Um, so look, I mean, it was 15 years ago. It was a time before LinkedIn.
yes,
So, all of those times I just went straight to an agency.
yeah,
Um, I had packed, even when I got to London and all I had was my backpack, I'd packed a very nice suit. So I
yeah,
showed up, I looked the part, I looked professional, someone that they could send, to their high-end clients. And yeah, and again, I was just open to anything. I wasn't picky, saying it has to be this, it has to be that. And all the three times that I've done it, I had temporary jobs which turned into permanent jobs. And
yeah,
I think that's because once I was in the company, they could see that I worked hard, I had a good work ethic, I was willing to, you know, do anything. I had, good team player, good person to have around. And they
Yeah.
always really kind of went out of their way to keep me on where they could. And each of those roles turned into something bigger where I managed to actually get great experience, which was amazing on my CV, and helped me with the next job and the next job. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think your attitude is so important. And this is what I see, as a HR professional hiring other people or working with people inside the company. Your attitude is everything.
Yeah. 100%. I've working the roles I do as a general manager in the past and such, especially in hospitality. I mean, I employ a lot of people, and attitude is everything. And it works the same for myself. Like when I've been traveling, when I went to Australia, for example, I jumped on a plane. The only thing I wanted to do was become a lifeguard. I had no other idea about what I was going to do, but I was
You've
sure
been
I was going to be a
watching
lifeguard.
lots of Bondi Beach.
I did actually get to lifeguard on Bondi Beach, which was pretty cool. But so I was there with no job, and I was wondering what I was going to do for work. Having a look around, I found this really cool Vietnamese restaurant in Bondi, and I went there for lunch. Had a really great lunch, got chatting to a few staff, and then 2 days later I went back, had another lunch, got chatting to everyone again. They kind of started to recognise me. And the third time I went back, it was on a Saturday, and again it was lunch, and I was sitting there, and by this time I'd already spoken to the manager a couple of times. And at the end of the meal, he came out and he said, "Oh, would you like anything else?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd quite like a job, please." And he laughed. He said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, well, do you want to start on Monday?" I said, "Yeah, great. I'll be 10 o'clock." I said, "Yeah, great. See you there." And I think, and we spoke to Aidan last time on the podcast, and he said exactly the same thing. If you're looking for a job in a restaurant, go to the restaurant, go and eat there. If you're looking for a job in a pub, go to the pub. If you especially in hospitality, it does tend to be what you do when you travel for the most part. So yeah, getting yourself out there and having a good attitude and taking risks in some respect, I think is very important.
Yeah, you have to get out there. And I mean, that's how I got my very first job as well. Do it, back in, the olden days, just printed out my CV and just walked around and just dropped it in.
In every door, hello,
yeah,
I'm looking for a job, here's my CV,
exactly.
smile.
And eventually, it paid off. So it's so important. And, and even in my husband's journey of arriving in Singapore and not having a job, once we did start to meet people, he told people, I'm looking for a job, or, I've got a contracting assignment, not exactly loving it, but, looking for opportunities. And the permanent job that he eventually got came through that network of someone saying, "Oh, talk to this person. I'll introduce you to this person." And yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is great and the digital world is great, but sometimes you have to go back to basics.
Yeah, people like to meet people. People like to see faces and talk and get to know someone. And for me, I once put a job out for administrative. Can't say the word, administrative assistant. And I got 500 CVs in reply.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like, if one of them had come in and handed me the CV, they would have been the main person in my head for sure. So yeah, very, very important.
Yeah.
Something I was going to ask you, I just kind of thought was, having worked abroad a lot and travelled for work, and there's always something that goes wrong. There's always a crazy disaster or a funny story, or something that happened. I just wondered if there's and if you look back at your time, is there anything that kind of comes to mind of that kind of disastery kind of experience?
Yeah, there's lots of things. So I lived overseas. I travel a lot for work. The roles that I've had in my company have required me to visit sites a lot. So, I've, traveled extensively, and I went backpacking around Europe for quite a few years, for quite a few months as well. So, I've got lots of different stories. Mostly, I would say they probably all relate back to a theme of me not being prepared or not doing my research before I go, and having this fly by the seat of my pants approach of just showing up and hoping everything will be fine. But things like leaving my passport in the hotel safe in Maastricht and then traveling by train to Amsterdam and getting there and checking into the hotel and realizing that my passport was 2 hours away, having to pay for a taxi company to courier it to me.
Yeah.
Things like when I was backpacking, arriving, to a ferry port in Greece without pre-booking a ticket, thinking, we'll be able to get on the ferry, it's not a problem, but totally missing the point that it was August in Europe, which is peak summertime, and that ferry had probably been booked out for months. Again, that's kind of coming from, that was very, very early on when I started traveling, not realizing that, in Australia, peak summer season is December and January.
Yeah.
So August for me is a little bit of a low time. So it'll be fine. So you learn things like that along the way. I think my first trip into Malaysia from Singapore, we went into a very local regional area and we stepped off the bus, and I just realized immediately that I was completely inappropriately dressed. Just didn't appreciate that not everywhere is as international as Singapore, where you can wear what you want and be quite, I don't know, just be whoever you want to be. And I got to this very, very local town where there's not a lot of tourists and there's not a lot of people from different backgrounds. And, I was wearing a bright blue dress and just everyone went and started staring at me. And I was like, oh, wow. So, it's a learning experience. I never did that again. I always was much more aware of where I was going, what I wore, a bit more sensitive to the local cultures and the fact that everyone is different. So
that's a really interesting point. Culturally, if often it's very difficult to be prepared if you don't know a culture until you get there, and you
don't know what you don't know.
And perhaps a bit easier these days with the internet, we have to research and stuff. But I mean, I remember being in India, and I was on a conference, and at lunchtime everyone kind of ate together around this massive table. There was about 40 people, and me and this girl Ellen were the only English people there, and people started singing. On the lunch break, it was great. We were like, this is wonderful, and then everyone's singing, and then someone else took a turn singing, and they just suddenly turned to me and Ellen and went, "Okay, you sing." And I remember I just kind of looked at her and I was like, "Can you sing?" She's like, "No." I was like, "I can't either." And they were like, "Come on, you have to sing something." And it's just this panic of, what do we sing? And unbelievably, the only thing we could think of was the national anthem. So there's me and Ellen singing "God Save the Queen" in this room of like 30 people, which was, I was so embarrassed and I just wanted to die. But it's like, they wouldn't let us go without singing something. But that was quite amusing. Yeah, very much so. But yeah, cultural things, I think.
Cultural things. I remember when my husband, he took an assignment in Singapore, and they sent him to a site which was for a Korean company. And at lunchtime, everyone pulled out their pillow from underneath their desk and put it on the table and put their head down and went for a snooze for 30, 40 minutes on their lunch break. And the lights went off, and my husband was sitting around looking in the dark going, what's going on? And then he realized, yeah. So, some of the cultures are so different. He was like, I'd rather just work through my lunch break and go home early. But, it's just the way that they do things. So.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. I think were you talking about being prepared and different things that happen when you're actually physically traveling as well. I decided to go to do a ski season in Austria, and I flew landed at the airport, and although I speak German, I couldn't quite work out which train I was supposed to be on. I was on the platform and this train pulled up and it just wasn't clear. And so I went up to the window and there's two women sitting next to each other, and I knocked. And I just put my ticket on the window. I said, "Is this just the right train?" They're like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, great, perfect." So I had 3 bags. So I picked up my rucksack, my big rucksack with like, all my clothes and everything in it, and put that in. Picked up my little suitcase with my money, my camera, my laptop, my passport, like everything. Put that on the train. And I walked over and I picked up my ski bag with just like 2 pairs of skis in it. And as I did that, the doors went doo, 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 doo.
Oh no.
And I was like, do I leave the skis? And then by the time I decided what to do, the doors just shut. The train started to pull away.
Oh my goodness.
And I was panicking. I was like, what do I do? And no one was there to stop the train or anything. And then so I ran up to the window where the women had been, and I put my ticket in the window. I was like, my bags, my bag. And then the train it was just gone. And I was saying, I've lost. I'm in the middle of Austria. I've lost everything. I was just.
It's like something out of a movie.
Oh God! I called my dad. My dad was like, "I'm in England, like in London. What do you want me to do about it?"
What do you want me to do about it?
Call someone. Like I don't know. Call someone. And anyway, another train turned up, and I jumped on the next train, and I went to the main station. I thought, well, I'll go to the main station and go to the lost property, tell them, and maybe they can get my bags. But I was the deep panic had set in.
Yeah.
And I arrived at the main train station, and I was running through the station, and I stopped in the middle, and I was like looking around trying to find like the lost property, and suddenly somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around, and the 2 women had got off the train with my bags and waited for me.
That's lovely.
I just jumped on them, and like I was like, oh,
that's so
a relief.
Nice.
And I took them both out for lunch to say thank you, and we had a really nice chat and stuff. But
you do meet some amazing people when you're traveling, and people that are just so kind and so willing to help. When we realized we couldn't get on the ferry in Greece, we had nowhere to stay, and we tried calling places. There was no availability. Everything was fully booked, and in the end, one of the gentlemen that worked at the ferry port said, "Oh, my sister runs her own B&B. I can call her and see if she has a bed that you could take." And we were like, okay. And he did, and she had the spare beds that we could take, and so we got in the car with him, and he drove us to her house, and we were so petrified, this is going to go wrong, but we didn't have any other, we felt we didn't have any other choice. We had to trust the situation, and everything kind of sorted itself out, and it was fine, and it was all genuine. But you do find yourself in situations where you have to trust people, and
absolutely.
It's all could have been avoided by being better prepared.
Right. But I think that's really important, and I think it can be a bit worrying sometimes for people, especially going somewhere new culture, that knowing if you can trust people or not. And my experience has been all positive. I've always found people to trust and look after and support you and help and want to help you. And I think that's a really important thing to realize, is that there are lots of good people out there that will look after you and help you, and you have to be sensible, obviously, and smart.
You have to be sensible. Trust your instincts. Usually I think in situations, if it doesn't feel right, it's usually not right. But you can, as a general rule, you can usually tell if it's kosher.
Indeed.
But,
Indeed.
But yes.
Well, so just going to move on a little bit. It's one of the things that you touched on, managing to get a number of jobs, when traveling, turning up and getting roles, which you didn't necessarily have, any educational experience from. I think you touched a little bit about how you did that, just putting yourself out there and getting a city. But it's a question that I get asked a lot, and I see people worrying about, and something for myself when I was younger, certainly worried about, is that, I think people often feel a bit stopped when they don't feel they have the right training, education, or experience for roles. But, do you see that's always really important, always relevant to have the right training, the right experience? Is that, always the most important thing?
No, Look, if you're a doctor or a midwife or a lawyer, then yes, absolutely. But I think, in a lot of jobs, um, it's not necessary. I think, there's a lot of things, over what's now been a 17-year HR career for me. I've learned everything that I know in the field.
Mm.
Um, for example, I could have if I went to university, they might have taught me how to release an employee, but I don't think that book value it doesn't mean anything until you're sitting in a room looking face to face at someone and having to tell them that you no longer have a job for them. Nothing can prepare you for that. And even over the 17 years I've been doing that, everybody reacts differently. And even people that maybe you thought would react in a certain way react in a completely different way. So being able to deal with those circumstances, it comes from life experience, it comes from doing the job, it comes from practice, it comes from just exposing yourself to those situations. So I identify with what you're saying, and even with some of my friends, I hear them say, oh, I can't apply for this job because I don't have you know this degree. And I really see that it impacts their self-confidence, where I look at them and say, you would be amazing at that job. You have all of the right competencies and the right skills to do it. And so I think sometimes people need that confidence boost and need to move away from the fact that they didn't study at university. And I think some people feel that it holds them back because they didn't get a degree, which
Yeah.
I think at a certain point of your life, after all the experience that you gain, it just becomes a piece of paper. um, I've also seen, I work with a lot of executive leaders, and I've seen really high performing leaders that didn't have a degree or didn't finish their degree. They don't go around telling people that, but but I knew it. And there was one person in particular who was so talented and had built his career on the fact that he had all of the right soft skills. He could build relationships with people, he was driven, he was able to build trust with his clients, he was so hardworking. He just was able to get the job done, really goal orientated to bring results. He was a salesperson, so had a real hunter instinct. That's not something that you get at university. That's something that people are born with. You're either a hunter or you're not. So um, sometimes it's just not relevant. It really comes down to the person being the right fit for the job, the person being the right fit for the company and the environment that they're working in, and the team. Is this someone you actually would want to be in your team, that you have to go for lunch with on Fridays? And all the teams I've worked in have become like families for me. So you want a person that you like
Yeah.
to be in that team. So there's a lot of different factors, I think, when it comes to choosing the right person. And I would encourage people not to be put off by the fact that they don't have necessarily all of the experience or some of the experience or a degree behind them. Just get out there and apply. If you're the right person, your recruiter will see that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, same for me. I having ended up managing, restaurants and other businesses and looking after teams of 40 or 50 staff, and all the business side of it, and all the from ordering to financial side and all that. I started out washing pots.
Yeah.
I didn't go and studied it anywhere. I, as you said, learn it on the job. In the field. It's, and I think it's a shame because
Yeah.
I think it does stop so many people. They think, oh, I can't apply for that role because I don't, I've not done that role before, or I haven't studied, specifically for that role. So it's a real barrier for people, and I think it's something that people, need to realize that it's not real. I mean, I would take someone who was keen, excited, up for it, willing to work hard, with a good attitude, friendly, happy, over someone who'd worked for 4 years with experience who didn't have some of those soft skills. most things you can learn for the most part.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah. It needs to be, yeah, for me, it's the right attitude, able to accept coaching so
yeah,
that, you can grow and develop them and help them to learn. And they need to have a desire to grow and
yeah,
learn as well. And this is
absolutely.
key. And one of the other things I think is really important is resilience. Business environments can be tough, leaders can be demanding, sales environments can be disappointing if you don't win. You need to be able to, dust, or even HR. I don't like terminating employees. It's the worst part of my job. It's a
Yeah,
really, really tough element of the job for me. And you have to be able to, at the end of the day, dust it off and wake up and start again fresh.
yeah,
And in Corona times, even more so. So resilience is a really key skill to have. And even in our company, I really see a lot of trainings and online learnings and a real push to kind of help employees to build this skill because it's
yeah.
really important.
Yeah, finding a good employer who looks after you, that's always a good important factor. Somewhere you can grow and learn and move forward. It's funny, you kind of almost touched on something I was thinking about, which is the other thing about work as well. It is just work.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and there's something I used to say to my staff. Worked in one place in particular, was very busy, coffee and hot chocolate place. I mean, like 50 people in the queue, kind of
Yeah.
throwing out as much as you can, like stressful.
Screaming, where's my coffee?
Yeah, literally. And I remember one person in particular. I could see she was just stressed and like trying to
Yeah.
cut. And I just kind of leant over her shoulder and I said, "Do just remember, you're making coffees. You're not saving lives.
Yeah.
It's okay." And she kind of like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "Just make as many as you can.
Yeah.
In the time that you can make them. Keep passing them out. They'll keep going. They'll keep new orders will keep coming in, and just do what you can. It's not,
Yeah.
and I think that's important, isn't it? It's to just
It's
remember what
funny you
you're
should say that because I have a post-it note
doing.
on my desk that says no one is going to die.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's something that one of my old managers used to say, in times when, it was really stressful and maybe something had gone wrong or something was running late and the leaders were screaming, saying, where is this? You should have had it yesterday. It's just remember, no one's going to die. Do your best,
yeah,
just focus on what you need to do and do it. And it's something that I've got better with over time. I'm quite sensitive and I take things personally, and I really want to do an amazing job and be everything for everybody. And over the years, I've learned that that's not possible. And sometimes you do things, people might not like it, they might not agree with it, and you just have to accept that. And I think it's probably taken, you know, 15 years to
yeah.
to learn that you need to put up a little bit of a barrier and take a step back and say it is what it is. As long as you've done your best,
It certainly takes
that's
a
all
bit of
you can do.
practice. Certainly takes a
Yeah.
bit of practice to be able to just go. End of the day, put it in a box, leave that at
Yeah.
work. Go and live your life. Come back, pick it up in the morning, and carry
Yeah.
on.
I
Not
think,
worry too much about it.
yeah, you're
And the other thing as well, there's always another job out there.
there's always another job out there, and your mental health is so important and your family are so important, and you need to keep everything in perspective.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's probably a good thing to leave it on, for sure. Having a bit of perspective and taking things easy and
Just
not
breathe.
just breathe,
Just
relax.
breathe. This is my motto, just breathe. So
Yeah,
um so
great.
thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, well, look, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share some tips and advice and stories with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you.
It's my pleasure, and I think, if it even encourages one person who's debating whether to move overseas and go and try something different to go and do it, I'll be delighted because traveling and working abroad has been one of the best things I've ever done, and it's just created the most amazing experiences for me. And you have to step out of your comfort zone and just go and do it.
Absolutely.
So good luck to
Absolutely.
everyone.
Very, very well said. Very well said. Cool. Well, look, thanks again. And
Thank
you.
you.
Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your day and your week. And you're busy.
Have a great
Now
day.
you have to get back to your extremely busy work schedule and looking
I
after all your
do.
people.
And I have my daughter's first birthday today as
Oh,
well.
today.
So today, yeah.
Oh, happy
So
birthday.
work-life balance. I'm going to
Yeah,
leave a little bit earlier and have a party. So yeah, trying to keep all the balls in the air, but yeah. So it's a special day for us.
oh, lovely. Well, all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.